Hello everyone and welcome on in, and today we're going to be doing a tier list of all of the Legend of Zelda games, at least the mainline ones. Now if you know me, if you've seen my channel before, if you've talked to me in Discord, watched my Twitch streams, whatever, you know that I'm not really a big fan of ranking things. But after my last video where I talked about the history of Zelda and stuff like that, people were like, well, are you interested in ranking them? And I said, sure. So here we are, ranking the Zelda games, and I thought it'd be fun. I've never really thought about it before. I mean, I know which ones I like and which ones I like less. There really aren't too many that I just straight up don't like, but today we're going to be going over them, seeing which ones are the top, the cream of the crop, the best there ever was, or maybe that's a different series, I don't know. But either way, let's get into it. Let's start with the first one. And I made this tier maker list here, and it didn't sort them all into the proper amount, but Legend of Zelda is up first. Now, Legend of Zelda is no doubt a monumental game. It's the first one in the series. It's the one that brought us all the other ones. You can never discount a first game, but I'm sorry, I'm getting started with the hot takes early here, and there won't be a whole lot of them. Trust me, I'm pretty simple when it comes to these games. But in my opinion, The Legend of Zelda is C tier. It's solid. It's not in the D tier. Matter of fact, I can't. Maybe we'll see one in the D tier. I don't know. The Legend of Zelda though is just fine. And anytime I think about going back and playing old Zelda games, it's the last one I think about playing. It's great. It was awesome for the time. It came out a year or two before I was born. So, you know, I didn't have the experience of playing it at that moment. And I know that adds so much to the experience. But for me, Legend of Zelda, the original NES, it's too simple in relation to all of the other Zelda games that we have, right? Okay, so it's not that it's bad. It's just in comparison, it's a C. Next up is Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. Now, I don't remember when this game came out. I was very young, incredibly young. Barely alive young, I suppose you could say. But I do know that some of the discourse over the years about this game has been just that it shook things up too much already in a second game in a series that was this young, and that some of the side-scrolling 2D stuff that they had going on was just not amazing. I have played this game, and I think that it's important, and I think that it's good. The Adventure of Link for me is going to have to be a B. We're going to put it at a B. I think it's iterative, and it was the one that kind of showed everyone that they could do the next thing, that they could make the next thing work, and that's important to me. And I think that it doesn't age very well, and I think that it doesn't play as well as it did in the 80s, but I think that it still somehow squeaks out past the original Zelda for me. This is my personal list. I'm sorry if you don't like it. Somebody else probably has a video. Okay, coming up next, it's 1991. The Super Nintendo system is out. This is, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, the only game to have ever been released, the only Zelda game to have ever been released on the Super Nintendo. And yeah, this game is going to be top tier for me. It's just going to go right up into the very S tier ranking of the Zelda series. And it had a lot more in common with Zelda 1, the original Zelda, than it did with Zelda 2. And even though I appreciated things that Zelda 2 did a little bit differently, I think the fact that A Link to the Past just introduced so many new things into gaming in general, not just into the Zelda series, but into gaming, things like parallel worlds and things like just time travel mechanics, and not that those concepts were entirely alien and before that, but just Zelda 3, A Link to the Past, was it called Zelda 3? Zelda, A Link to the Past was just a phenomenal revolution in my opinion. And even though I don't always buy into the argument that you had to be there to experience it, to understand it, I do think that's somewhat important with this game. And again, I didn't play it until a couple years after it had been out, I'm quite sure. I can't remember exactly when I played it, but I know I played it when I was young, and I've played it many times since. And it just has some special magic and charm to it that I don't know. A Link to the Past is one of these seminal games in the entire universe for me. And when it comes to Zelda, top tier. You don't do better. Sorry. Even though there might end up being other games in the S tier here, I don't think you ever do better than A Link to the Past. That's just all there is. That's all there is to it. Next up is Link's Awakening from 1993, and for me, this game came at a time when I was pretty young. I had a Game Boy. The Game Boy had been still such a groundbreaking technology that we could carry around. I know it had been out for a few years, but we could carry around a game with us, and just that very idea. And I think that's really how Link's Awakening kind of came to be, is that, you know, they were anticipating putting A Link to the Past into porting it over onto the Game Boy, and eventually they just ended up making a new game. And that game was Link's Awakening. And Link's Awakening for me is an A tier game. I think there's so much about the fact that it was handheld and that they could do so much with it. And there's just some different aspects to it that I don't know that I really appreciated until I got a little older. The fact that there's just, I mean, you're not in Hyrule. How often do you take a game and a series that's already been established through 3 other games and say, we're just going to go somewhere else? Oh, and by the way, it's named after Zelda. She's not here. Zelda's not in the game. Sorry. Just have fun with Link. Everything you need to do, you can do with Link. And I thought that was really special, especially as I've gotten older and played the game more than once. It's kind of insane to me also that this game really drove sales for the Game Boy, which had, again, already been out for a couple years. It's just really incredible. But this is the only game that has gotten what I think is like a true remake. There have been other remasters and stuff like that. And I didn't include any of those on the list, except I did include Link's Awakening for the Switch on here. It came out in 2019. And when they said they were going to do a remake of Link's Awakening, I was not happy, because Link's Awakening, in my opinion, is, again, one of the best. It's up there for sure. And when they did Link's Awakening remake, everything about it was better. You don't get the same time and place sense. You don't get the same playing it on the original handheld, the Game Boy, that we never really thought was going to be something that could ever happen. And then it happened. And granted, now we have the Switch, and, you know, that's excellent. But Link's Awakening is just... the remake is so good. And guess what? That's why it's going in S tier. I know it's higher than the original. I don't know if that's legal, but this is my list and I'm doing whatever I want. Link's Awakening, even though I'm going a little bit out of order here, Link's Awakening is going to take a spot on the S tier above the original. I did it. I did it to you. I'm sorry. Next up in release order, it's kind of weird because they took quite a few years off developing the next game, which is Ocarina of Time. And I don't think most of us were ready for what happened with Ocarina of Time. And Ocarina of Time, I'm going to warn you here before I actually put it there, it's going to be high, okay? And I've heard the revisionist history over time that this game was overhyped and it's not as good as we remember. And, you know, playing it today is... I agree to some extent, but Ocarina is still such an incredibly playable game that you have to consider everything else that went along with it. And Ocarina of Time was the first game in the Zelda series with 3D graphics that enabled you to feel even more like you were in the world than you did before. And for me, Ocarina was just... to be able to feel the overworld and then be able to feel the dungeons differently, and you've got the time travel, and there's no doubt why this game is so often on people's top list, and it's here on my top list as well. Ocarina of Time going to the S tier ranking. Again, the revisionist history, I don't want to hear it. I remember 1998. Ocarina of Time, it's one of the GOATs. It's one of the games that, for me, I don't know really about the industry, but it changed the way that I understood how games went. The Nintendo 64 in general really changed my perspective. And I really think that it's kind of how we view our games today more than ever before. It's the first... Nintendo 64 was really the first generation, in my opinion, that brought us the games in the way we play them today. And Ocarina was one of those games that just blew it out of the park completely. It's S tier. Game over. All right, so next up we have Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, and admittedly, I did not play these games when they came out. It was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years after that. They came out in 2001, and as many people know, they came out pretty much released right next to each other. And this was kind of the era, where Nintendo was starting to figure out with Pokemon that they could put out one game and figure out how to get you to buy two. And Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons were different in the fact that they actually had slightly different experiences. It wasn't just like, different things you could catch or whatever. There were different types of way you could do things, and then you could even transfer them between the games with a password, if I'm remembering correctly. I only ever got to have one of these. I had Oracle of Ages. I was not able to afford Oracle of Seasons, but from what I understand, they are fairly similar, and oftentimes when I've talked about them, I've kind of just lumped them in together. But in fairness, I haven't played Oracle of Ages, but I'm still going to rank it alongside Oracle of Seasons. And for me, that is on B. I'm going to give them a B. They were nice games. They were fun to play. I didn't quite play them in the zeitgeist that they were in, so, it's hard for me to look. I've only ever played through them once. That's part of it, too, is that, I don't have as much experience with these games as all the rest of them, or most of the rest of them, but I thought they were fine. They were great. They had a cool idea. They're a little bit more puzzly. You could experience it differently with friends who had it. I think they're great games. B, nothing to sneeze at in my opinion. They're not one of the greats, but they're certainly not the worst. So I kind of thought long and hard about whether or not I wanted to put Four Swords on the list at all, because if you remember, Four Swords is a game that was a multiplayer only game, and I did play it. I never owned it, but a bunch of buddies of mine, we went out and we rented copies of it, and we played it at his house for a birthday party. We did like an all-nighter. We played all night, but we were also playing other stuff, and honestly, I don't know if I ever finished it or not. I do remember it being enjoyable, but also like I was hanging out with friends. We were teenagers, just goofing around, whatever. And so I don't 100% know if it's fair for me to put this on my list, but I'm going to anyway. And I'm putting it on the C because I'm giving a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but I'm also not really sure. So, hey, if you want to totally disregard my opinion on Four Swords, go for it. That's absolutely fine with me. But it's a smaller game. It's kind of just, I don't really know where it falls in the grand scheme of things. But I think it was fine. It was a passable game. Good game. While we're here, let's talk about Four Swords Adventures. Four Swords Adventures, for me, it's kind of a miss. Honestly, this is the first one that's a D for me. This is the first one that's anything less than really good, in my opinion. I just felt like Four Swords, it just wanted to be a multiplayer game, and that's totally fine. I think multiplayer games are great. I love multiplayer games, but it wasn't what I wanted from a Zelda game. And it wasn't the same style. I mean, you've got different levels that you progress through rather than being in one, big world that you're in the whole time. And it felt like the whole time, all the game wanted me to do was to play with other people instead of just enjoying the game and playing by myself. And again, I love multiplayer games, but Four Swords Adventures, I don't know if it was the time of life I was in, if it was just that the game wasn't my favorite or what, it just didn't hit for me. I did not enjoy it. And it's D. It's a D. I don't even know where that game ranks in the pantheon of all the other Zelda games for most people, but for me, it could not exist and I'd be fine. Sorry. Next up is the Minish Cap. And I'll tell you what, the Minish Cap was a surprisingly great little game. I wasn't really expecting it because the art style to me I was like, why are we going backwards? We're in the why are we going backwards? But once I played it, I understood it. And just the different features that it introduced and the concepts that it brought and the story, it continued on from Four Swords Adventures. I think it continued on from there, and it involved some of that same storyline. It wasn't really necessary for you to understand it and enjoy it. So I think it's a little bit shorter if my mind is recalling correctly, but for a Zelda game that still has dungeons, that's okay with me, because it's not very often you get a great game with dungeons, with a little bit of, overworld crawling as well, that it still kind of leaves a memory with you. And so for that reason, the Minish Cap, you're going to go into the B list here. Now, when I say B list, I'm not meaning like it's not a negative thing. You know, we're on the B list. It's still a great game for me. I just looked down at the bottom of the list and I cannot believe that I just completely skipped over Majora's Mask and the Wind Waker. I was like, how are we in 2005 already? It's because I skipped Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. Guys, right away, I'm just gonna let you know, Majora's Mask, it's going to A tier. A lot of people would probably put it up in the S tier. I'm gonna leave it down in A. It's still amazing. It's crazy how much they did with this game in such a short amount of time after Ocarina. And I know that they reused some assets and everything, whatever. That doesn't bother me. The part about it that is a little bit, I don't know, it was a little bit darker for me. I always thought that the masks and the transformations and everything were awesome, but I was never quite sure, and still I'm not quite sure how I feel about that all being in a Zelda game, because that was never part of Zelda before. But I still think it's a phenomenal game. Except, you know, we've got the Ocarina again. I've always thought the Ocarina, playing music into it to time travel, go different places, I just thought it was weird. I don't know. It just never sat right with me. But Majora's Mask, following up Ocarina of Time so closely, is just, it's a 1 and 2 punch, but the second punch is not quite as heavy of a punch as it should be, maybe. As for Wind Waker, it's a B for me. It was fine. Wind Waker, when it came out, I didn't really love the art style, as many different people didn't. But of course, it's grown on me over time. It grew on me while I was playing the game. The sea exploration, and it's funny now, if you know me, like I love sea-related games. I play Sea of Thieves a lot. Wind Waker, one of my biggest complaints were I don't want to be on the ocean, and I guess it's because it's a Zelda game as opposed to something else, and I have a hard time with change sometimes with series that I love. So the Wind Waker, not my favorite game by any means, but again, it's on that B list. Look, we've got a lot of different games on that B list right now, or on the B spot on the list, and again, that's not a bad thing for me. It just means that it's a pretty good game. I don't have anything to complain about, but it's also not like exceeding my expectations. So I'm pretty happy with that. Wind Waker, you can set it to B level, and I'll be pretty cool. All right, now that I've cleared that up, gotten the ones I forgot out of the way somehow, I don't know how I possibly could have forgotten those 2 games especially, it's time to really dig in. This is when I know that people start getting a little bit irritated with the way that people talk about this game. Twilight Princess. Whew. I don't even know where to begin with Twilight Princess, because Twilight Princess for me was one of the first games, maybe the first game that I played for the Nintendo Wii, which of course was this crazy brand new system that everybody had to have. But also Twilight Princess was like, oh, well, it's also still on the GameCube, so you can play it there if you want. And I had a GameCube at the time, and I was just so conflicted about where to play it. But I ended up getting a Wii. I ended up getting Twilight Princess, and I pretty much ended up disliking Twilight Princess, okay? It's not that I think it's a bad game in any way, shape, or form. It's that the whole thing for me was a toned down experience of everything I had had before. And the fairies just bothered me. And the way that the dialogue was just bothered me. And the darkness of the game bothered me. And I was in college at this point, or maybe just graduating college, actually. I don't remember, but at any rate, it was around that time where, I don't know, I was gonna, I had to start going to work, and I had to start, like, it just, for some reason, the game was a little too dark for me in the time of life that it was. Now, with that said, Twilight Princess is an amazing game. I think it's a phenomenal game. I think that it did a lot of things for the series that the previous few games hadn't done. I mean, right before Twilight Princess, we had the Minish Cap, and shortly before that, we had Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess blows both of those games completely and totally out of the water. And so I think that it was a really good turning point for the series, and it kind of introduced us into like that larger world that we know and love Zelda and Link in. But I don't know, for me, it just didn't hit right. And so don't worry, I'm not putting it in on D. It's going on C. Twilight Princess. Now that's either a take that some people are going to say that's not nearly harsh enough, and other people are going to unsubscribe from the channel. So if you wouldn't mind doing me a favor, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe so you could offset the people who unsubscribe. I'll go ahead and wait for a minute. Okay, thanks. Anyway, Twilight Princess, now that that's out of the way, well, let's move forward. Okay, next up we had Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I'm just going to be straightforward with you here. I've never played either of those games. I have played every one of these other games. I have played most of them multiple times, with the exception of Oracle of Seasons. Again, I mentioned that I only played one of those games. I didn't play both of them. So other than that, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, I don't know. I just didn't play them. I don't know why. So they're on the have not played list for me. And while we're at it, I didn't play Triforce Heroes. I was having a kid, doing a master's, was working at a business, working full time. I just didn't have time to play Triforce Heroes at the time, especially when it didn't get very good reviews. Skyward Sword. Will we ever stop debating about Skyward Sword? There was a reinvigoration whenever they did Skyward Sword HD and everybody was talking about it again. And I just don't know if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but I've only ever played Skyward Sword one time. I played it the entire way through, and this was back at release. When the game came out, I played it. And for whatever reason for me, it didn't jive with me. I didn't understand it. I didn't really understand what they were going for. And it felt like the motion controls, like they built the motion controls on the Wii specifically to piss me off. Like, not just like everybody, just specifically it did not work right for me. I played a lot of games on the Nintendo Wii. I never had any issues with any of them. I very rarely traded in my games, especially once we got into like the Wii era. That kind of, I was finally starting to have a little bit of my own money as getting out of high school and working, and like finally able to like buy things and keep them. And so I stopped trading in my games, except for Skyward Sword. I beat Skyward Sword and I immediately went and took it to GameStop and asked for whatever amount of money they would give me for it. And that was that. I don't think Skyward Sword is a bad game. I just think for me, and it's clearly not a bad game, so many people love it. I just think that the mechanics in the game were a little bit dated, or I don't know. It just didn't feel right with the motion controls, and nothing about it worked right. And I've never played Skyward Sword HD, so I'm not really doing the remasters in this video, but I just think that for me, Skyward Sword, it's going to sit at a C. Again, I don't think it's a bad game. I don't think it's a D like Four Swords Adventures. But it's not anything special to me. It just didn't... I don't know. Let me know if you agree with that one. Skyward Sword is the one that I always feel like I'm missing something, because I remember playing it and just thinking about what a terrible time I had. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong. Let me know what you think about Skyward Sword. Please give me some feedback from somebody who has listened to my thoughts and might be able to give me some insight there. All right, A Link Between Worlds has a really special place in my heart, because this is when, I was like newly married, having a new kid, really needing to have more free time and not having very much free time. And I had a 3DS, and I got the Zelda 3DS, and of course I got Link Between Worlds, and it was the perfect little machine for me to play a game in the series that I really, really loved. And of course, with how much I've always admired A Link to the Past and the very obvious influence. It's weird to say that a Zelda game is influenced by another Zelda game, but that's clearly true here. With A Link Between Worlds, you definitely see a lot of the DNA of A Link to the Past coming through. And I think it has a lot more to offer than people thought it did initially, and maybe even still do, in that it's got so many different facets to it that A Link to the Past, it just iterated on those things. And for me, it's just, this is my personal tier list, right? It's a game that meant a lot to me at a time when I needed a game that was comfortable and that was exciting and that was fun. And for practical purposes, that was on a handheld. So A Link Between Worlds for me is an A game every day of the week. It's at minimum an A game. Someday, maybe it becomes an S game, but for now, man, I really hope they put that game on other consoles. I really do. Yeah, it's such a great game. And the way that it was presented and everything with, you know, Link being drawn onto the walls and that imagery and just the way that he moved across the landscapes and was able to morph in, it was so fun. And it was impressive to me that it was on the 3DS. I don't know why, but it just felt like a game that was a little bit more sophisticated. And now, of course, we see other handhelds be very sophisticated, but we didn't have anything like that yet. And for that reason, you know, A Link Between Worlds is one of my all-time favorite games. I don't know that it's the best Zelda game, but it's really, really good. So many times we've had a Zelda game come along. The series has been out for, you know, almost 40 years at this point. And in so many different times we can say that a Zelda game has come out and made the industry different. And that is exactly what happened with Breath of the Wild in 2017. And I think that even though there are many things about Breath of the Wild that I do not enjoy, I don't like stamina bars in any game, but I don't really like that I can't climb right away forever. You give me the ability to climb anytime I want, anywhere I want, and then you put some rain down. No, then I can't climb. Excuse me? What? You tell me that I can do whatever I want, but I have to have a stamina bar and able to be able to do it. I get it. It's a game mechanic. It's just not one of my favorites. I also don't like the breaking weapons. Wah, yes, I'm going to cry about it. But guess what I'm going to do? I'm still putting Breath of the Wild as an S tier game because it just is. It revolutionized the entire series. It revolutionized games that we still haven't seen come out yet because games are so far behind in figuring out what they want to do. Developers decide after they see a game come out that's really popular, I'm going to make a game like that. And then guess what? By the time that game comes out, it's not popular anymore. But that's what's happening with Breath of the Wild. We're seeing that kind of come to fruition here 6 years after the game came out. And everything about Breath of the Wild brought a new energy into the Zelda series. And Zelda, the series, has always been a game about exploration and discovery and understanding the things around you and finding new things. All the way back from the very early games when you had the dungeons and the new abilities to do things, and it's always been a game about exploration and discovery. And even though people will say that Breath of the Wild is not a Zelda game and it didn't, you know, this isn't what I know Zelda to be, it has the heart of Zelda all over its sleeves. And I understand that it's got its quirks. It's got things about it that people don't like. I understand. I get it. But they're wrong. That's really all there is to it. Zelda Breath of the Wild is the quintessential modern day Zelda game. It has all the markings of greatness written on it. And it really shines. And that brings us to Tears of the Kingdom. Now, full disclosure, I'm not done with Tears of the Kingdom. I've played, I don't know, probably 30 hours in the week and a half that it's been out. And that's a lot for me in that amount of time for one single game. I usually play plenty of games, but they're usually different games for one single. So I'm working on it, guys. I'm working on it. And that partially may explain my ranking it. And I think the ranking may change as we go forward. But first of all, I think Tears of the Kingdom is excellent. I think it's a phenomenal game. I think everything that Breath of the Wild did, Tears of the Kingdom has done it better, especially when it comes to the building mechanics in it. And it comes to, well, I don't even really want to talk about all the stuff in it because I just know that so many people are playing it right now. And so I'm trying to be sensitive to spoilers because I personally don't love spoilers. So Tears of the Kingdom for me is easily an A game. Some of you are upset already that it's not higher. Some of you are upset that it's not lower. For right now, 30 hours into this gigantic game, I am saying that Tears of the Kingdom is just below S tier. If it continues to be as good as it is, it could go up to S tier for me. If it doesn't really impress me, I don't think it drops below A tier. It's so good. It's really, really good, guys. I'm sure you know this if you're watching this video, but Tears of the Kingdom is really remarkable. And I'll have more to say about that in a future video, potentially. So here we go. Here's the list. S tier, Link to the Past, Link's Awakening Remake, Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild. A tier, Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, A Link Between Worlds, Tears of the Kingdom. Pending, I guess. B, The Adventure of Link, which is Zelda 2. The Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, The Minish Cap, The Wind Waker. C, the original Legend of Zelda. I'm sorry, I had to do it to it. Four Swords, Twilight Princess again, Skyward Sword. Oh man, my C tier is just loaded with things that people are probably going to be mad at me about. Four Swords Adventures comes in at a D. I did not like that game at all, and I haven't played the remaining ones. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if this is something you're interested in me doing. I'm probably some guy you don't know who you just listened to talk for however long this has been. If you enjoyed it, or you pretended like you enjoyed it, please make sure to give me a subscribe. I'd appreciate it. It costs you nothing, and it really makes me feel good. If you are interested in seeing more of this kind of content from me, let me know in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up, whatever you got to do to let it be known. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.